This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, December 31st. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in West Africa, where Ghana's main opposition party says it is challenging the outcome of the presidential election won earlier this month by Nana Akufo-Addo. Soraya Early has our report.
Ghana's main opposition party says it will formally challenge the outcome of this month's presidential election won by incumbent Nana Akufo-Addo.
My immediate task.
Akufo-Addo was declared the winner of the December 7th election with 51% of the vote. Opposition candidate and former President John Mahama received 47%. The campaigns were filled with heated rhetoric and election-related violence that killed at least 5 people. The decision to challenge the outcome is a rarity. Ghana has a reputation as one of West Africa's most stable democracies. The opposition National Democratic Congress has yet to produce evidence of fraud and provided no details about the case it would file. It's a rare move in a country where losing candidates typically concede defeat. Only one other Ghanaian presidential election in 2012 was formally contested by the losing candidate, and it was the same old rivals. Back then, the court rejected Akufo-Addo's challenge to then-incumbent Mahama's victory in a case that dragged on for 8 months.
That was Soraya Ali of Reuters reporting. A group of influential opposition politicians in Central African Republic are calling for an annulment of last Sunday's election. They say 1/3 of voters were unable to cast ballots because of insecurity. Voting took place amid an offensive by armed groups in rural areas long beyond the reach of government control in the sparsely populated country of 4.7 million people. The opposition coalition, including 5 presidential candidates and former President Francois Bozize, say the vote should be repeated. Burkina Faso President Roch Marc Christian Kabore, who was re-elected for a second term, dismissed Prime Minister Christopher Dabire from his post on Wednesday and dissolved the government, according to a presidential decree. It is a usual procedure after the legislative elections. A poor and landlocked nation of 20.5 million people, Burkina Faso has been plagued since 2015 by recurrent jihadist attacks that have left at least 1,200 dead and 1 million internally displaced. President Kabore is promising to bring security and stability to the country for his second and last term. Britain has approved another vaccine for the coronavirus, this one developed by Oxford University and the pharmaceutical firm AstraZeneca. As Henry Ridgell reports from London, scientists say the vaccine could be a game changer in the global fight against the pandemic.
The approval of a new vaccine is welcome as Britain suffers a surge of coronavirus infections. Regulators say the Oxford University AstraZeneca vaccine has shown around 70% effectiveness against COVID-19, a relatively high figure compared to many vaccines for other diseases, and is safe to use.
As I've said before, and I will say again today, the safety of the public always comes first.
The AstraZeneca vaccine is a boon for developing nations. It costs around $3 to $4 per dose and only needs to be stored at refrigerator temperatures.
Developing countries with less sophisticated cold chain and with smaller budgets will be able to use this vaccine.
Earlier this month, several Western nations approved the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, which is around 95% effective. But not only is it more expensive at around $20 per dose, it must be stored at -70 degrees Celsius. Research into the optimum dosing regime for the AstraZeneca vaccine is ongoing. Britain plans to administer the first dose to as many people as possible, rather than focusing only on elderly and vulnerable groups. A second dose will follow up to 12 weeks later for longer-term protection.
There is government pressure to increase the coverage of vaccination, and that's understandable. People want it done as quickly as possible. But if you end up putting more people in hospital because they're vulnerable and they didn't get the full regime of the vaccine, then that means that our hospitals are still going to be under pressure.
The British government has welcomed the approval as a cause for great optimism.
We can now see our route out of this pandemic.
But the road to recovery will be difficult. Britain is struggling with a surge of infections driven by a new variant of the coronavirus that doctors say is over 50% more infectious. There are record numbers of hospitalizations, with patients being treated in ambulances as hospital beds are running short.
Control room staff are having to make incredibly difficult decisions to decide who gets an ambulance and in what order, quite often with huge numbers of people waiting for ambulances and they have nobody left to send.
Several cases of the new mutant virus have now been found in other countries. Scientists say its spread makes the global rollout of vaccines even more urgent. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
In a year of declining press freedom amid the global pandemic, China took the lead in media repression. VOA's press freedom editor Jessica Jureit has more.
Blocking information on the coronavirus pandemic, jailing bloggers, imposing restrictions on foreign journalists, and in Hong Kong, introducing a national security law resulting in high-profile arrests. China is at the forefront of government repression of media in 2020.
I think the pandemic has overshadowed what I think is the most disturbing trend or development this year, which has actually been the situation in Hong Kong. Because I think it's an example of the sort of larger struggle between, liberal societies in which press freedom is respected as a basic value, and a more authoritarian model of society in which the press is understood as a vessel of government messaging.
Beijing's actions to delay visas and restrict permits for local and foreign journalists stifled international coverage. Foreign correspondent Bill Birtles was forced to leave Beijing at short notice after police sought to question him and another Australian journalist. In December, a slew of arrests included Jimmy Lai, publisher of Hong Kong's Apple Daily, and Chinese nationals who worked for Bloomberg and the New York Times.
The extension of Chinese law, in particular the national security law in Hong Kong, has led to a major press freedom crackdown already. And we are deeply concerned about this because I think that this is one of the clearest examples, in recent times in which a society that enjoyed press freedom for so many years is seeing that freedom removed, before its eyes and actually before the world's eyes.
China says it is responding to US moves to restrict visas for journalists from Chinese state media.
美方一方面标榜新闻自由，另一方面
The U.S., on the one hand, is boasting of freedom of journalism. On the other hand, it is hindering and interfering with Chinese journalists reporting in the U.S., which hence exposes its hypocrisy of freedom of journalism.
Washington labels Chinese-run outlets as foreign missions and has limited visas in response to Beijing's treatment of foreign journalists.
Regret China's decision today to further foreclose the world's ability to conduct the free press operations that, frankly, would be really good for the Chinese people. Really good for the Chinese people in these incredibly challenging global times where more information, more transparency are what will save lives.
China has a record of detaining those who criticize authorities or report on abuses of minorities, such as the Uyghurs. According to press freedom watchdog, the Committee to Protect Journalists, it was the leading jailer of journalists in 2020, putting 47 behind bars.
This year, what we saw is that the reporting on COVID-19 and the pandemic, both the existence of the pandemic, but also then the governmental responses to the pandemic, landed journalists in China in jail. It also led to the expulsion of many foreign journalists from China.
In 2020, when access to reliable, independent news seemed more important than ever, experts fear that China's crackdown on the press may signal a troubling trend. Jessica Dorit, VOA News.
U.S. congressional Republicans won't be the only ones critical of Democratic President-elect Joe Biden's agenda when he is sworn into office in January. Biden, a centrist, will also face challenges from the progressive wing of his own party. Here's VOA congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson.
President-elect Joe Biden still weeks away from the White House, but already challenged by progressive Democrats who say they helped him win the election.
That's what our next move is to make sure that the Biden administration keeps its promise, kept its promise to young people, kept its promise to the movement for Black lives, kept its promise to communities and working class people across the United States of America.
Several progressive presidential candidates competed for the Democratic nomination earlier this year and sometimes criticized the party.
We are taking on the entire political establishment, both the Republican establishment and the Democratic establishment.
That made for an uncomfortable debate about the party's values that was never quite resolved.
The Democratic Party is a progressive party, and progressive ideas are popular ideas, even if there are a lot of people on this stage who don't want to say so.
Although Biden argued he could bridge the gap in the party, reminding voters of his record as vice president.
Progressive is getting things done.
Democrats who lost the nomination to Biden said they had advanced the discussion of progressive ideas.
We have ideas now that we talk about that we just weren't talking about even a year ago. A 2-cent wealth tax and universal child care that could be real.
But Democrats did not make as many gains in Congress as expected in the November election.
Justice!
Losses many moderates blamed on progressive slogans like defund the police.
There's a lot of scrutiny as well on the progressive wing to say, is this really the direction that Americans want to take? And I think that, if you look at both the fact that the Democrats didn't pick up as many Senate seats as they had anticipated, and they lost seats in the House, there's an argument to be made that the progressive agenda does not have the traction that maybe the progressives felt that it did.
But Biden is still keeping progressives in mind as he makes transition cabinet appointments.
The incoming Biden administration is being very strategic and very careful, knowing that they need to bring the progressive wing of the party along with them. And they've certainly made a nod to some of the kind of early appointments in the administration.
But even if Biden partners with progressives on ambitious legislation on climate change, police reform, and health care, there's little chance of it passing on Capitol Hill.
The margins are so incredibly slim that I think it's going to be very difficult and a very heavy lift for progressives to get any kind of major reforms on the table and actually signed into law.
For many progressives, Biden's presidency is seen as a transition away from Trump, with the biggest opportunities for change still ahead. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
U.S. President Donald Trump secured diplomatic normalization agreements between Israel and Arab countries during his term, but he is leaving office amid renewed tension with Iran following the assassination of its top nuclear scientist. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara looks at Trump's legacy in the Middle East and the diplomatic challenges for President-elect Joe Biden's incoming administration.
The Abraham Accords normalizing Israel's relations with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, signed in September, is widely seen as President Donald Trump's most significant foreign policy achievement.
After decades of division and conflict, we mark the dawn of a new Middle East.
The accords altered the decades-long regional perception that Arab-Israeli peace cannot be achieved without first addressing statehood for Palestinians. They also reflect Israel's improving ties with its Arab neighbors as they face Iran, a mutual enemy weakened by Trump's maximum pressure campaign of sanctions. President-elect Joe Biden has said he supports more countries recognizing Israel, with a caveat for the Palestinians' plight.
Also, I believe that Israel has to be prepared to work toward a genuine two-state solution.
Biden has promised to return to the 2015 JCPOA agreement, which Trump withdrew from in 2018. The deal suspends Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. The plan may be complicated by the recent assassination of Iran's top nuclear scientist. The White House has not condemned the attack, which Tehran blames on Israel.
What I suspect will happen is the Iranians are going to keep restrain themselves the way they did after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, and wait for the Biden administration to come in and see if they can cut some kind of deal with him, although that will be a very thorny process in itself. But the fact is Iran cannot afford a military conflict at this point with U.S. or Israel, or for that matter, anybody else.
While Trump prefers bilateral relations often based on personal ties with foreign leaders, Biden is expected to adopt a more multilateral approach in engaging allies. Still, analysts do not expect a fundamental change in U.S. policy in the region.
But certainly a different tone and a different type of engagement. I think the people, particularly those who are active in human rights and democracy in the region, will very much look forward to those two issues becoming important once again for the United States, not to promote aggressively, but at least to support.
Like Trump, Biden has pledged to end forever wars in the Middle East and Afghanistan, focusing only on Al-Qaeda and Islamic State terror groups, and ending support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. Analysts warn that a decreased military presence in the region has repercussions.
That could be a lessened influence in the Middle East, and it could be resurgent ISIS, it could be our enemies coming into play in the Middle East. So there's a lot of things to consider that the president is going to have to deal with within the upcoming year.
In his early months, Biden will likely focus on the domestic pandemic response, including vaccine distribution, delegating much of foreign policy to his pick for Secretary of State. Anthony Blinken has worked with Biden for nearly 20 years, including on Middle East policies, with mixed results in Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and Libya. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
Still to come, a review of the top 10 African music videos of the year. Stay with us. Welcome back to Africa 54. While the year 2020 hit musicians hard in Africa and around the world, it didn't knock them out. Here's a year in review of some of the best.
Top 10 countdown of the best African music videos from 2020. That's what's going on right now. Hey everybody, I'm Heather Maxwell, host of the Music Time in Africa radio program on the Voice of America. And these are the best 10 music videos I have come across all year. Let's get started. Number 10 is Wa by Santrinos Raphael from Togo and featuring Zainab from Benin. This music video is so loved because it's unifying. It bridges love and respect across countries and across generations. Number 9 is MUKWASHA by Ja Preza from Zimbabwe. This music video is the funniest one I have come across all year. MUKWASHA means son-in-law, and it depicts the common relationship between a man and his in-laws in rural Africa. Coming in at number 8 for Best Overall Vibe is the Amapiano hit Akulaleki by Samtin Soweto and featuring Zimbabwean singer Shasha, DJ Maphorisa, and Kabza De Small. Number 7 is Emergency by Bosom Young and featuring Wendy Shea. This is the most romantic music video from 2020, especially in light of the coronavirus and all the emergencies we've had. The video, with the best blend of traditional African culture and total global pop, comes in at number 6 with Wonderful by Burna Boy. The costume, the dance, the juxtaposition of global with micro-local is just breathtaking in this video. Number 5 lands us in Uganda with Tweyagale by Eddy Kenzo. With its easy tempo and friendly vibe, this is the best feel-good music video of 2020. It's also inspired others to do their own versions of it, like this one by Masaka Kids Africana. Now, number 4 is out of Tanzania. It's Quarantine by Diamond Platnumz and his whole Wasafi crew.
Quarantine. Okay. Quarantine moves. Yes, quarantine. On the left, to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5.
This one premiered in May, so that was early on in the coronavirus outbreak. And it just uplifted us.
Quarantine. Quarantine moves. Yes, quarantine.
Number 3 is Duduke by Simi from Nigeria. Now, this is the sweetest music video about family, and specifically about mother and child.
Do you know how much I really need you?
Number 2 out of Kenya is Susanna by Sauti Sol. This video is beautiful and it's deep. It speaks to all of Africa with its storyline of a sister who has lost her way overseas, lightening her skin, getting body modification implants, and her family is begging her to come home where she's loved. And finally, number 1 is Jerusalema by Master KG featuring Nomkrebo Zikode. This music video from South Africa premiered in December 2019 and has since taken the world by storm. It is a global dance craze. The music video has over 280 million views, and that's just scratching the surface, as countless more videos have emerged from fans around the world doing their own versions of this amazing dance. And that's Music Time in Africa's Top 10 Best African Music Videos of 2020.
That was Music Time in Africa. Host Heather Maxwell with the top 10 African music video countdown. Some made us dream with their movies. Others made us dance, filling our hearts with music, while others influenced our lives with their writing and designs. VOA correspondent Mariama Diallo reports on some of the people who passed away in 2020.
Among the movie actors lost in 2020, Sean Connery, who died at 90. The charismatic Scottish movie legend shot to international stardom playing the first James Bond.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Chadwick Boseman, another superstar, also passed away. He was 43 and was best known for his title role in Black Panther. The list also includes veteran Bollywood actor and one of India's most well-known exports to Hollywood, Irfan Khan. Two-time Oscar winner and Gone with the Wind movie star Olivia de Havilland died this year at 104. She was one of the last surviving cast members of the classic 1939 film.
Gone with the Wind.
was the happiest experience of my entire career.
Lost from the music world,
rock and roll is alive forever.
Rock and Roll Hall of Famers Little Richard and Bill Withers, Grammy winners John Prine, and Kenny Rogers. An actor-singer, Rogers preferred to be known as a country singer despite his crossover music success.
I think, well, country music is the white man's rhythm and blues. It's where the pain is.
Anu Dibango, who fused African rhythms with funk, died at 86. The Cameroon-born saxophonist was also known for his effervescent personality.
Manu Dibango's symphonic laughter. He wouldn't say a sentence without bursting out laughing. He was a man at his age of an inalienable youth, unalterable, and always positive.
The sudden death of basketball legend Kobe Bryant and his 13-year-old daughter in a helicopter crash shocked the world in 2020, prompting an outpouring of grief. Another sudden loss felt around the world, Argentine soccer giant Diego Armando Maradona, who suffered a heart attack.
Ruffled-haired, funky, devil-may-care type of individual, fun-loving, who is just effortlessly brilliant. And that's why he was called El Pibe de Oro, the Golden Boy.
Franco-Japanese fashion designer Kenzo Takada died in 2020. He was known for his jungle-infused designs and free-spirited aesthetic. 3 former presidents also died in 2020. Former presidents of Ghana, Jerry Rawlings, of Mali, Amadou Toumani Touré, and most recently, France's Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. Other public figures, U.S. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a legal and feminist icon, died at 87.
We must say, wake up, America, wake up. We're going to continue to fight.
A pioneer of the civil rights movement, John Lewis, died in 2020 after serving more than 3 decades in the House of Representatives.
We have made some progress. We've come a distance, but we still have a distance to go. We still have roads to travel.
And George Floyd, a black man whose death in police custody
begging for his life,
sparked an uproar against racial injustice in the U.S. and around the world, was among those the world lost this year. But 2020 will also be remembered for COVID-19, which caused hundreds of thousands of people to perish as the pandemic swept across the world, shattering economies and lives. As the year drew to a close, more than 68 million people were infected worldwide and more than 1.5 million died from the illness. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.